Hey, welcome to the Podcast Accelerator, the thrice-weekly show that brings you podcast education, industry insights, and straight-talking reactions to podcasting news. I am your host, Mr. Mark Asquith, the British podcast guy and CEO and co-founder of Rebel Base Media, the podcast tech company that creates the Podcast Success Academy, podcast websites, Productivity, Rebel Base Studios, and, of course, Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host, where you can get your first month of podcast hosting for just $1. And, of course, transfer in an existing podcast completely for free. And today I'm going to continue to talk about podcast rebranding. So if you listen to the last episode, go and refresh your memory, because we talked about 3 questions to ask yourself before embarking upon a podcast rebrand. And today I'm going to continue that thread by kind of flipping that coin around and discussing 3 questions to ask your listeners before rebranding your podcast. But before I do that, just a little reminder that my wonderful friends Brandon, Chris, Kelsey, and the team over at AWeber are still giving you the chance to try their wonderful email marketing platform for 90 days completely for free. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Marco, why on earth do I need email marketing in 2019? Well, 2019 is the year where you need to get on top of your email marketing as a podcaster. Because look, here's the deal. What are you trying to do as a podcaster? You are trying to connect with your listeners. And today we're going to talk about that in even more depth than maybe we've done before. Email is still the best way to do that. Without any shadow of a doubt, email marketing is the best way to create a relationship with your audience. I do it, and if you're on my email list, you'll know that I do it very, very regularly. And I've become friends with people on the email list. You start conversations. That's what podcasting is all about. So go and build a relationship with your listeners. Try AWeber completely for free at markasquith.com/AWeber. Now, I've said this before, but your podcast doesn't just belong to you. I know that sounds really weird, but instead of thinking about this as your show, I want you to start to understand that your listeners are your biggest stakeholders. And honestly, I believe that they should have a say in this. They should absolutely have a say in what you do with your show. Because if you think it through, they absolutely spend their time. The one thing that they are not ever getting back, they spend with you. They spend that time with you. Think that through. They give up some of their valuable day to spend it with you, okay? So if you kind of embark on a podcast rebrand, if you change things based on the questions that you asked yourself on the last episode, and you don't consult your listeners, well, you're going to lose a little bit of trust. You're going to lose a little bit of good faith. You're going to lose a little bit of goodwill, okay? So I've talked about this before, and I find there are different types of questions as I develop as a podcaster and as a business owner myself. And these 3 questions, I've been kind of pondering these as I've gone through my own podcast rebrand and revitalize the Podcast Accelerator. And what I want to do is give you a bit of a 3-question framework, a little bit open-ended, which will allow you to really understand what people want from your show. Now, because these questions are generally open-ended, it's number 1, you're going to get so much more answer. But number 2, what you're going to get is a little bit more work to do, all right? You can't just say, well, look, everyone said yes, or 90% said yes, or 30% said yes to question A, question B, question C. That's good, but you're kind of guiding it a little bit. You're only giving people a Boolean, a yes or a no, or even with multiple choice. You suffer very often, unless you can randomize the options in a multiple choice, you suffer with the primacy and recency problems insofar as, okay, I generally choose the first or the last thing that I see, the primacy and recency kind of biases. So open-ended questions, you get so much more data from, okay? So this is what I want to dig into today. So question number 1 that you should ask your audience and your listeners, and you can do this either with a survey, or you can do this by asking this questions sequentially over the course of a number of episodes and getting people to email in or tweet you or whatever. A survey is really good for this. The first thing that I want you to ask is just ask them to tell you about their listening behaviors to podcasts overall. Okay? To podcasts overall. So tell me how you listen to podcasts. What are your behaviors? What are your habits? What we're trying to achieve with this is one very specific thing. We're trying to achieve from this the notion that we can create a show that fits into the habits of the majority of our listeners. So if we, for example, if we say, okay, tell us about your listening habits. And they come back to us with, well, do you know what? What I'm finding is that I'm subscribed to about 10 shows. So where I used to listen to 30-minute shows, I'm enjoying like the daily because it's a news show. And then I'm enjoying the Podcast Accelerator because it's a short form show. And I'm also enjoying then 20 minutes of content from someone else. That's my listening behavior. I tend to do it at, between 9 and 9:30 as I'm commuting to work, or I tend to do it as I'm driving home, or I'm at the gym, or I'm walking. And what we're trying to do is understand how they consume podcasts so that we can find a place to fit into that ecosystem. Because what we don't want to have to do is force people to displace another show to listen to our show, because people have got a finite listening time. It's not unlimited listening time. They're not subscribing to every podcast because they don't have the time. So we've got to find a format that fits in. So that's the first question. Tell me about your podcast listening habits, okay? Can you do that? Open-ended. The second question that I want you to really kind of dig into is, why do you continue to tune in to my show? Why do you continue to tune into my show? Now, this sounds quite obvious. You will expect a certain type of answer, but you may be surprised that you don't get what you expect. The goal of this question is very specifically to ask people, okay, what are the things that you like about my show? And in particular, it's sort of the things that you might be surprised that you'll find that these people like, the listeners like, the sort of thing that you maybe don't like. So that one segment or that one tagline or that one thing that you are just sick to the back teeth of because you've done it 150 times, they might love it. Or that one thing that you really enjoy doing, no one may mention that. That one piece of the puzzle, that one part of the show. So we've got to get honest feedback from people because, we talked about it on the last episode. It's got to be right for you, but it's got to be right for the listener. So why do you tune in to my show? What keeps you around? Okay, what do you like about my show? What do you dislike about my show? Nice and open-ended. Don't guide it. So don't say things like, do you like when I do this? Do you like when I say this? Do you like this? Don't say that, because it's just easier for them to say yes. They've got no skin in the game. So it's easier for them to just say yes and not hurt your feelings. Leave it open-ended. Okay? Leave it open-ended. And then the third question that I think you've got to ask people is actually, whilst it's open-ended, you're looking for a much shorter answer here, okay? The question is, if you were to describe my show to a friend in one sentence, what would that sentence be? If you were to describe my show to a friend in one sentence, what would that sentence be? The goal of this question is to understand how people think of your show. So this is not like the last question, which is, okay, what do you like, dislike? What do you tune into? What don't you like tuning into? This is very much, please sum my show up for me so that I can make sure that I'm hitting the mark, or so that there's no disparity. We want to make sure that everyone is on the same page, that what you think you're getting, I'm giving you, and what I think you want, you believe I give you. Okay, so that's what we're trying to achieve with that question. If you were to describe my show to a friend in just one sentence, what would that sentence be? Now, equipped with the knowledge that we gained from these three questions, plus the questions that you asked yourself on the last episode, you actually stand in really, really good stead here for creating a brand new rebranded show that hits the mark for everyone, all right? That is what we're ultimately trying to achieve. So ask those three questions of your audience. I prefer a survey. Pop it on your website. If you're a Podcast Websites member, you've got that functionality built into your website. Whomever your WordPress is hosted with, whatever your website technology is, I'm sure you can do something with this. If not, go and sign up for Typeform. All right, go and check that out. That's going to give you free surveys as well. But like I said, if you are a Podcast Websites member, you've got this built in already. So thank you so much for joining me here on the Podcast Accelerator. Remember to tell all of your podcasting friends that the show is available to listen to for free in any app that supports podcasts. And look, if you're wondering what the best next step is to take for your own podcast, whether you're a new podcaster or whether you're a veteran podcaster, go and take our short 5-minute survey where I'm going to personally help you to diagnose the main issue holding your show and your podcast growth back and give you access to our free, vibrant Podcast Rebellion community, some weekly free group coaching from me and the team, actionable insider-only emails, and even a free invitation to the Podcast Success Academy. So please, if you've got 5 minutes a day, invest that 5 minutes to grow your podcast by heading to rebelbasemedia.io/grow. And again, as always, never forget, the more you expect from yourself, the more you will excel.